members, a diversity council, as well as board members that may be joining us. We do thank you for joining us this evening for what is the first of what we hope will be many in the series of educational and educational programs for what we are referring to as Diversity Works program and resources to be made available on the Chamber of Commerce website for Atascadero. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Wendy Wendt of First 5 Slow and Raechelle Bowlay of We Are the Care to share with us on the topic of how we can best support working families, an area of extreme importance so that we can help our little ones grow up to be all that they can. Tonight, you'll hear from Wendy and Raechelle and just a little bit about Wendy. I read this really great article that was published in, I think it might have been, I can't remember, it was Paso magazine or so, some time ago, but really extensive article. And so I learned that Wendy was a product of the Midwest upbringing between St. Louis, Missouri and Ohio. And, you know, that's really cool. Typical riding the bikes until it gets dark coming inside, things like that. She attended Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, and studied history and Russian, which is two things I really enjoy. I had a very cool Soviet history program in my high school of all things. And now she is heading up the First 5 of Slow organization. So Wendy joins us. Welcome, Wendy. I do look forward to hearing from you. And
separator he ordered on accident. Did you return them? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there's some background noise. Sorry. Please mute yourself. Thank you. And not to be outshined, Raechelle Bowlay, who is also going to be presenting this evening, is also a champion for children, working with the We Are the Care to support our child care providers in the community. She is a mother of 2 boys and serves as the Child Care Planning Council Coordinator for CAP Slow, and is also a member of our Diversity Council here at the Chamber of Commerce in Atascadero. So I want to extend a great welcome to both of you and thank you in advance for your time and information you're going to share with us and all who are present. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you 2 ladies. Just a little housekeeping. We'll probably have a good 40 minutes or so that you can present, and then we'll save some time for questions at the end. And tonight's session is being recorded, so just be aware of that, everybody. And with that, I turn it over to yourself, Wendy and Raechelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. So hi, again, my name is Raechelle Bowlay. I am the coordinator for the San Luis Obispo County Child Care Planning Council and also a member here with the Diversity Council. I'm super excited. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully that all works smoothly. Everyone can see. All right. So as Charles was saying, we are going to be talking a little bit about an initiative called We Are the Care. And what that means and how we can actually help support the childcare crisis and children and families in our community. And I'll hand it over to Wendy to talk a little bit about herself as well as we've been working through this initiative.
Well, it's really great to be here, everybody. I see some familiar faces, actually. Just a one-liner on First 5. First 5 is a statewide organization that manifests itself locally in counties across California. There are 58 counties, 58 First 5s, and I am on the staff of the First 5 San Luis Obispo County Agency. We both support and advocate for early childhood initiatives, both in health, early learning, and family support. So the conversation we're having tonight about childcare and working families as it relates to an equitable society is right in the pocket for First 5. So I was really happy to be invited to join Raechelle and meet with you all tonight. I am also going to just tell you a little snippet of information about We Are the Care at the outset of this presentation, and then we'll circle back to some more details at the end and can answer questions. But We Are the Care is an initiative that was started by a group of organizations and individuals who came together back in mid 2019. So feels like a century ago. To talk about the childcare challenge in both our county, our state, and in our nation as it relates to both affordability and accessibility for families to be able to find the care that they need for their children. And then also the viability of the profession itself. How do we as a society value childcare professionals, childcare businesses? And we came together partly because we recognize there's a real challenge around this issue, and that it's not something that can be solved on the backs of childcare providers and parents alone, that this is a public sector issue, it's a private sector issue. Government at all levels needs to be leaning in on this conversation, and it's also an economic development conversation. So to be talking to you all tonight as members of the Diversity Coalition and the Chamber of Commerce in Atascadero is really, I think, appropriate to this conversation, because it's an all hands on deck kind of challenge for us to deal with, as you'll see in the details of our presentation tonight. So really happy to be here. Both Raechelle and I and Christina and a couple other people I think on this call were at that initial Where's the Care town hall that has just exploded into this quite amazing countywide movement, which we affectionately call We Are the Care. So when we refer to that, that's what that initiative is. I think I'm passing it back to you now, Raechelle, to also highlight some details about this month in particular, why this month with this group is so appropriate.
Yes.
April.
So for those of you that hopefully everybody does know, April is Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month. And one of the really neat things, pause that real fast because it's going to start. The really neat thing about April as Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month, normally we have a whole bunch of different celebrations throughout the county where we actually have events and vendors and all of that good stuff. You know, cotton candy, that's my favorite part of it all. But we're actually able to meet a lot of the resources and programs that are out here. This year, we're doing it a little bit different. We're actually hosting it all online through virtual events. And we're doing some drive-through family resource events as well. So you can go to sanluischildcare.org, and every day we spotlight a new program or community resource for whatever is going on in the community. We have some of our partners, some of them are paid programs, so families can pay for the services, or they are free of charge for the community, but just a way that we can share the community resources that are out there for families. And then on the bottom part of this slide here too is a little bit more about the drive-through resource events that we're having throughout the county. And so that's another place where all of our family resource centers that are funded throughout the county are hosting an event where people can drive through. There's diapers and wipes, and we have activity kits for all of the families. There's resources that you can learn about what else is going on. Food Bank has paired with a few of these as well to be a food bank distribution site. But just so that families know there is a place to go if there is something that you do need in any way. And also through all of this is all collaborative work, as is all of the work that we're going to talk about tonight. So it's not just one agency you might come through. We all work extremely close and knowing a lot about each other's programs, we can help navigate that for families, because sometimes it is hard to just say, I need help. And figure out what that looks like. And that's our job, is to help create that connected community and also help programs and people know what else is out there as we're supporting it. And then a little quick thank you and plug for Month of the Child. These are my boys. Some of you might recognize them. They get to be our token spokespeople because that's their place here.
Thank you for celebrating with us. April is Month of the Child
and Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Now more than ever, we need adults like you supporting us
so we can grow, learn, and thrive.
Because in a connected community, children are never alone.
So that's them. It's their little piece that they get to do. But yeah, definitely I want to say thank you for inviting us here for April, because it is such an important month. And I'll also share too here that this is part of a really great launching point for us as we're going through all of this. We really put a lot of our dedication in terms of public outreach during this month, but also sets us up for the rest of the year as we're going through. We make a lot of connections with our local government and doing proclamations at all the city councils and board of supervisors so that they understand and can look at policy as it pertains to supporting children and families. So thank you for this opportunity this month and getting to be the first of this speaker series. So on that, I will move on to our next slide. And just looking a little bit about, actually, I'm gonna go back one more, looking at childcare and what that means and how childcare is so multifaceted in terms of when we're looking at childcare, it's starting with looking at children, and that's at the center of all of this so that we can make sure that we're giving children a healthy start within their life. This is a foundation and they need a healthy start from the very beginning, whether they're at home, in childcare, school, in the community, and really looking at how we can build that for them. And childcare is that first piece of it. And also, as we're looking at that, we look at helping and supporting the childcare professionals, and we're really cognizant of using that word professionals. It is a field of professionals that really dedicate themselves, their time, their effort, their education towards creating that foundation for our children. And so we want to make sure that we're really cognizant of how we support those people and that chosen profession. And then also looking at childcare as a business. So these are small businesses that are supporting our community. And what a perfect place to talk about childcare business as with the Chamber of Commerce. It's a small business and we're here to be able to support that as well. And then the next piece of this, I'll hand it over to Wendy.
Thank you. So as I mentioned in my introductory comments, I think over the years, our society in general has come to lean primarily on children and families, and then childcare professionals and childcare businesses to solve the challenges of childcare and provide the service. And the assumption is that it will somehow serve the needs of the broader community. And especially in recent years, it's been, I find an encouraging sign that members of the broader business community, employers of all sizes and shapes, and their employees are leaning in on this conversation and seeing the value of childcare, quality childcare, accessible and affordable childcare as a fundamental facet of a thriving community and a thriving economy. It's not just, it can't be seen anymore as an individual benefit for a working family. This needs to be the bedrock of any community, regardless of whether a family or a business or an employer has children or not. It's been something that's been a real heavy lift over the years. I think we a long time ago figured out that K-12 education is important and that's a public good, but we haven't caught up until recently in the conversation around early childhood education and childcare. So this is this kind of next layer of support for children and families, for the childcare professionals and childcare businesses that are doing the hard and incredibly valuable work of taking care of our youngest residents in the community. And the other reason I think that employers are weighing in and getting more involved is they're starting to recognize more and more that there's a return on investment for a system that supports its childcare businesses and childcare professionals. If we have a society or we have a community where employers and public and private sector partnerships can make sure that childcare is affordable and accessible for working families, then we're able to attract and retain talent in ways that are critical to us moving forward and remaining healthy as a local economy. There are other communities that are figuring this out, and if we don't figure it out, the workforce will go elsewhere. And so this return on investment within our communities is an incredibly important conversation and is underpinning a lot of the work that we're doing to build alliances with our business partners. But there's one more and probably the most fundamental element of this multifaceted conversation that Raechelle is going to call out and will remain part of our conversation for the rest of today and forever.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. And so that last piece is, this is an equity issue. And as we're looking at childcare and supporting our children, that it on many different levels is an equity issue in terms of the equity for our children and creating that that foundation that every child needs to grow, learn, and thrive. But also as we're looking at the businesses and what that means within our community here locally, but across the nation as well, as we look at supporting the families and the people that need childcare. And we look at the employers and the employees. It really goes across the board and looking at this equity issue, and supporting childcare is supporting equity across the board. And then we'll talk a little bit about that too, in terms of what it means to have equity here within and supporting childcare within Atascadero. So just in Atascadero alone, we have 30 family childcare homes, and I'll just break that down a little bit of what that looks like. A family childcare home is our terminology where people are providing the service of childcare within their own home. And so when we look at that, it's someone who has chosen to take care of other children. There's an entire licensing process that goes along with this. It's not just, hey, I want to take care of kids in my own home. There is process to go through and make sure that the health and safety of children are taken care of, and looking at the environment and looking at a whole bunch of different pieces and getting licensed to do so. So there are 30 people that have committed to that step. Along the way, there is a lot of other stuff that they need to do as well in terms of professional development and additional supports and resources. So it is a very viable business and small business within their home. The other piece that we have are center-based programs. So in Atascadero alone, there are 15 center-based programs, which is a substantial portion of the North County childcare availability. As we're looking at all of this. So within just Atascadero, there's 45 businesses. So even looking at it from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, that's 45 small businesses serving our community. And that's the childcare industry. The next little piece on this slide is looking at what we call subsidized childcare. And that's government subsidies to support income eligible families to pay for childcare. And they can go to Head Start program, which many of you might know, a state preschool program. They can also choose to go through our alternative payment program, any of these family childcare homes or center-based programs. They can go anywhere, and their subsidy, their payment for their childcare goes with them. And so through that, with their income eligibility, just in the first quarter of this year alone, and through one of my partners through the CAPSLO Childcare Resource Connection, they were able to pay out almost $300,000 in just childcare subsidies. That doesn't include all of the private pay programs or any of the actual funding that a program might get directly from the state or the federal government. This is what's coming through to help support our economy. So when we're looking at childcare as a business, it is a large sector of revenue that is happening within our community. And that, again, is just in Atascadero alone, which is really neat to see how we can help support that, but also how we, as part of the Chamber of Commerce, can help support that local industry and small businesses within our community. As we're looking forward, the next piece of what we'll talk about is a little bit more on the childcare crisis and how we can help support that.
Right. So these 5 phrases touch on some of the big issue areas that when we come together as a community to talk about the childcare crisis in our county, we're touching on all of them at the same time. So I'm just going to briefly sort of define and introduce you to each of these issues, and then we're going to unpack them sort of one by one with some more specific detail. But access, as you might imagine, refers to this idea that either a family can or cannot find appropriate childcare for their young ones that is close enough to their house that it's convenient, or close enough to their place of work that it's convenient for them to be able to transport their child back and forth. With young children, for infant toddler care, access becomes an issue when it's accompanied with things like lactation. And then there's also the concept of access as it relates to what we talk about in the field as non-traditional hours as well. There are a lot of businesses in this community, especially in tourism and agriculture, that don't fit the model of a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 12 or a 1 to 4 kind of typical traditional childcare setting. And yet it's very hard to resource and find supports for those non-traditional program models that are so important for families, working families, especially in our county. I would also say that it uncovers one of these areas when you look through the lens of equity. This becomes a really big problem for families who have jobs in non-traditional hour settings and struggle day in and day out to be able to hold their job and have a place for their child to be taken care of. So we grapple with this access question all the time. Affordability, I don't need to define that for you, but I can give you a little bit of a nuance, and Raechelle's going to show you some more statistics in a couple slides. But anyone who's raised children here or anywhere for that matter knows how much a bite out of your monthly budget childcare can take. In this county, for a family with 2 children under the age of 5, it's very likely that they're spending as much on childcare, if not more, than their mortgage or their house payment or their rent. So we talk a lot about housing affordability in this county. I'm really pleased to hear the conversation more and more start to include childcare affordability as well. I'm going to skip over impact on women just for a minute, not because women aren't important. Obviously we are, but I want to couple affordability with the childcare workforce and just briefly touch on what I often talk about as the paradox, the math equation that doesn't add up, whereby childcare is not affordable for parents, but it's bargain basement wages for childcare workers. And people often ask people like myself, Raechelle, Christina, others who are in this work, how is that even possible? How come it's so unaffordable and so expensive? And yet childcare professionals are being paid so little. I'll save the punchline for Raechelle's part of the presentation, but this is a real conundrum that we're in. And when those kinds of math equations don't add up, it can't be solved by parents and childcare providers alone. It has to come to the level of policy, either public policy and or public-private partnerships. So this is something important to keep in mind. Impact on women. I would say that the story around impact on women touches on all of these other issues: access, affordability, and the childcare workforce. Again, you'll see some of the details in a minute, but the suboptimal system of childcare in our society and in our county as well has an undue effect, an unfair effect on women, both women who are trying to hold down jobs or careers and need childcare for their children to be able to balance that, and then also women who make up the majority of the childcare professional workforce itself. So no matter which of those other 2 icons you look at, affordability or the childcare workforce, it's women that are feeling the strain and have the most potential to feel the gain if society finally comes to terms with and addresses this and invests in childcare the way they should. Finally, sustainability. Childcare has always been an industry that is somewhat on the ropes because it's living, the childcare professionals and the small businesses, those 45 businesses you saw before COVID, they were already struggling to make ends meet. They were already making decisions or out of either passion or necessity to operate a childcare business while on food stamps because they had chosen this profession and believed in it. And so it was already a question of fragility, when you think about sustainable models of service in our community. Throw in a little COVID fairy dust, and you can imagine, if you haven't been reading the papers, what has happened to this sector, which has done unbelievable things in the face of unbelievable challenge and circumstance and risk to their own health and well-being to continue taking care of our kiddos during the pandemic. And so I just want to put in a special plug around that word sustainability, that if we come out the end of this crisis, this both pandemic crisis and this childcare crisis, which has been much longer term, and don't take on childcare in a real significant and new way, well, shame on us. So that's my slide. It's on to you, Raechelle, to do a little more detail work in each of these areas.
And so, thank you. When we look at access and affordability, as Wendy was talking about, it really does go hand in hand. It's the access to having a space within childcare and also being able to afford that space within the childcare arena. And so I have on here a couple of different scenarios, and you can go through and read. I won't read them all to you. But the different piece of all of this is that it is dynamic for what each family needs. It might be the age range. It might be knowing that they have, two children that are under 5. One is an infant and one is in preschool range. And so knowing that both can go to the same program or not go to the same program, and then how are they both going to get to wherever they need to be? You're also looking at the times of day and where that might be located. It might be someplace that's close to your home or close to your work. There's a lot of different factors that come into play. And then as we're looking at all of that and figuring out, yes, there are programs that exist, but they have to meet the need of every single family as we're looking at all of this. There isn't this one blanket way of solving childcare and creating more programs and all of that. So when we're looking at this, we are definitely looking at the access piece of all of this, and then the affordability of what that looks like. And so there might be a spot that's available at a program that a family cannot afford in terms of that, or they might be receiving or qualify for subsidized childcare. And so when we're looking at subsidized childcare, again, that looks at income eligibility. It's around $36,000-ish a year for a family of 4 as the ceiling cap to receive childcare subsidies. But then when we look at the actual sustainable living wage, which I believe is $67,000 in our county, that's a very large gap. So between the $36,000 that you can make and still help and get help and subsidies to what it actually takes to have a sustainable living wage here in our county is a pretty big gap in terms of when childcare fits into that. How do you make that work as well without any other outside supports? And so when we're looking at this, again, same piece of that affordability. Is it affordable for that family on top of everything else you have to pay for a family? And when we're looking at this, it's also just looking at the availability of childcare. How many programs can we have within our community? Again, how many programs and families or how many small businesses can sustain this model as we're going through? It's not a money-making business to be able to say, let's just open up some more. And the same piece with all of this, we cannot downsize or make efficiencies. This takes care of people. And so we need people and slots and children in programs. We cannot say, oh, we'll have more children in this one program to make it more affordable. So when we're looking at that, there's a lot of work that goes around all of this with access and affordability. And I will share one piece of this, and you'll see this a little bit throughout. There's an entire organization through CAPSLO, part of the branch that I work with, through the Child Care Resource Connection, that specifically tries to help families navigate this really difficult system in terms of trying to find childcare that fits directly for them, because there are a lot of moving parts and pieces with all of this, and being able to get them the support that they can qualify for. So when we're looking at that, this is how we try to help triage and navigate this entire childcare system for at least families as we're looking at the access and affordability. But again, remembering that it's super dynamic and very individual for each and every family as we're going through this. And on top of all of this, when we're looking at equity, it's the same piece too, in terms of how do we have a program that fits each child as well. And a slot where they're speaking the language that that family understands, or whatever else it might be. And even looking at inclusive models as well. When we're talking about that access piece, is it accessible for that family's needs? And the next piece of that, I'll hand this over to you, Wendy.
Yeah, so just briefly wanted to return to the question of women in the workforce. And again, before the pandemic, we were making steady progress, albeit slow, over many years and decades. we know that even a small decline in workforce participation by women could undo, a quarter century of progress. So, I think we were very proud of how far we'd come over the years. There was still a long way to go. And then, next slide, please, the pandemic hit. And as I was saying a few minutes ago, this has really set us back in a significant way. We're catching up with the statistics, but at the end of this last year, the unemployment rate for women was 30%. According to, I can't remember where we got the statistic from. And Christina, you could probably elaborate for hours on this topic alone. 4 times as many women left the workforce as men during this pandemic. And it continues to be a real problem. And so making up for lost time is going to be a real challenge. And the childcare piece of the equation is critical. Perhaps at the end, I know I'm leaning on you a little bit, Christina, but this is an area that I know that you've been paying particular attention to, and would love to hear your perspective on that piece of it specifically. So I think we're pivoting now to the other side of the equation. So far we've been talking about access and affordability, and Raechelle is going to share with us some of the voices of the childcare professionals themselves. That other side of the paradox, right? Not the affordability, accessibility side, but how are we supporting and resourcing our professionals themselves?
And so we have just a short video that I'll just lead into of just what it means for the childcare sector.
We need to pay our childcare providers a decent wage so that we have greater supply, and so that across the continuum of employers and employees that they can find adequate quality childcare.
I work mainly with family childcare providers. They are committed to quality improvement in their programs. They come to trainings sometimes after 9 or more hours of work in their programs, and they come to training knowing that it most likely won't affect their ability to generate more income, but they do it because they're committed to improving their quality, and because they know that education and care is very important to the children in the community.
And this program is just wonders, and the community needs it. They need more of this. They need more Teacher Myras. They really do.
It's like improv jazz. So you're basically trying to figure out the tune as you're playing it yourself, and you're trying to keep them safe. You're trying to help them build skills, whether it's fine motor, whether it's social emotional, whether it's the number of skills that they're developing at a rapid pace at that time, and it is a rapid pace.
We're only going to need more of these professionals, and I'm concerned that they're not there. And when I go and speak in some of the classes, and when I speak in the classes, I don't hear the students believing that this is a path they want. And we need more of me. So how do we do that?
So that's just a little clip from our Where's the Care? We Are the Care initiative, as we were looking at kind of that childcare professional piece in terms of what it takes to build this other part of the puzzle as we go through and looking at the childcare workforce. And so, as building off of what Wendy was talking about and that impact on women, it's not just women in the workforce. We're looking at the workforce of childcare. And knowing that 40% of childcare providers and workers are BIPOC women. And so BIPOC means Black, Indigenous, people of color. And again, looking at what this means, that is part of this equity and diversity conversation as we're looking across this sector of childcare, but also knowing who is making up that childcare professional workforce as we're going through. The other piece of when we're looking at this, and this is again a national statistic of 25% of childcare workers live in poverty. So when we're talking about this, this is full-time work or beyond full-time work. and still not being able to make a livable wage. And again, being able to support themselves, their own families, and figuring out what this looks like. So they're part of the childcare workforce, but also the workforce in general. And when we're looking at people of color, we're looking at women and how it disproportionately affects those sectors. And again, part of this entire equity conversation as we're moving forward. The other piece that is really interesting for us as we're working in the field, but also was brought up in that video, is building this workforce. It is not a viable career path when you're looking at this. It's not one of those really glamorous jobs where you're going to make tons of money. You're not going to walk out with a 6-figure income. But at the end of the day, for anyone that has worked with children, and each and every single child that you work with, they have a place in your heart, and that's the reward of it. However, when we're trying to sell that to the next generation of people that are going to be part of this childcare workforce, it's really difficult to do that. And so we've seen a steady decline over the past few years within Cuesta College courses of early childhood and development. And when we're looking at that, we use Cuesta College here locally as our piece because that's the very quick timeline and workforce pathway that we have in terms of education to be a part of this field. And so when we're looking at that decrease in enrollment, we're looking at the decrease in classes, we're also looking at a projected decrease of our workforce. And so when we're doing this, same conversations again on if we don't have people to care for our children, we're not going to have childcare spaces and programs. This is, again, something we can't have a machine do. We can't downsize and make it a little bit easier in that regard. We can't streamline and make it more efficient. This is a person. You need a person to care, a caring, loving adult to help that child grow. And so that's another piece as we're looking at all of this. And this statistic of 13% decrease was in the past year of programs. And that, again, has to do, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, with the impact of COVID and this pandemic and what that even looked like in our community as we're going and changing and shifting through all of this. But another piece that I do want to share in terms of the workforce is just kind of that hourly wage. And I was talking about that. Most teachers, and this again is a very rough estimate, and again, pre-pandemic for these numbers as well. So we haven't even begun to look at what this looks like after the pandemic. But these are teachers that are putting in, again, long hours and need to also do, like it was said in that video, they have to do professional development. So each childcare worker is required to do, if you have your permit and go through that certification process, 105 hours of professional development every 5 years. And all of that time is usually on their own after work hours. So we provide training and professional development and conferences, again, all in their own time. So they're working all day and then coming to our trainings on the weekends and evenings to do this. And so that's that dedication piece. But to be only making $13 an hour, less than minimum wage, as we're moving forward, or a lead teacher that has their bachelor's degree making around $16 is really hard to sell as we're moving forward with this workforce. And then the same thing too, when we're looking at our center directors, and our center directors have their degrees as well. Their bachelor's degrees, some of them have their master's degrees, and they're still only making about $20 an hour. So when we're looking at this, it's really hard to show the value. And when we talk about this, and we've talked about this before in many different arenas, budgets and what we pay people shows their value. And when we're looking at this, this isn't the message that we want to send. These are our childcare professionals. They have to go above and beyond that call of duty in order to serve and take care of and educate these young children. And they deserve a livable wage. They deserve to be paid as such. The other piece that I do want to share on this too is just looking at what a childcare business looks like. So it wouldn't just be, oh, pay them more. We'd all love to. That has nothing to do with it. It's when we're looking at the childcare expenses, and this is just, again, a sample business expense of a childcare center. If they actually had 40 children enrolled in their program, and again, pre-pandemic, because there are a lot of restrictions that were put on to programs of actually how many children can be within that facility and how far apart they need to be, and a whole bunch of other pieces. But when we're looking at this, the salaries actually take up more than half, 65% of a program's budget. And so when we're looking at that, those low salaries take up that much. They have a small wiggle room of about 23% looking at materials and admin, and then 12% for the rent and utilities. And that's, again, if they're not getting any other types of subsidies from the government in any terms of, a rent subsidy, or if they're able to partner with a business or with their landlord to have lower rent. There are all these different ways that programs have been really creative in terms of making ends meet. But every single business that I've talked to, every single childcare provider that I've talked to is not running on this huge reserve where they can say, oh, it's okay. And if you guys know teachers and childcare providers, hoard everything, because it could be a craft. It could be something that we can use with the children. And that comes from that scarcity of resources. And it's great creativity. But when we're looking at this, is that what we should be focusing on with our children as we're moving forward and creating those super tight margins? We want to make sure that we're paying for what's necessary and how that all comes into play. And we'll talk a little bit about that too with sustainability. We can't just create more revenue, because that comes from families that, again, are already struggling to afford that already very expensive slot in childcare as we're going through. And then the next piece that I'll talk about too is this entire impact of what this pandemic has done. As we're looking at the access of programs, there have been a lot of restrictions. We're starting to kind of ease up on what those look like now, where previously a good chunk of programs had to cut their enrollment almost in half in terms of how many children they could actually serve, because there were a lot of requirements in terms of distance that we needed to do to keep children safe. And the one piece that I will say with all of this, as we've moved forward, and I'll talk a little bit about that too, but also within the workforce, is really showing and having that health and safety of staff. So when we're looking at this, childcare never stopped as we're going through. So as this entire pandemic happened and is happening, childcare didn't stop. Childcare was always considered an essential business, an essential part of our economy, essential for our children. And so our childcare providers did not skip a beat in all of this, still providing care, even when nobody knew what we were supposed to be doing. There were CDC regulations almost daily coming down in order to help keep children and families safe. And so being able to disinfect and do everything on top of keeping these children safe and healthy and educating them has been huge. It has been a huge impact on this field and on the workers going forward. Just as we're looking at all of this, this is not something that we were ever prepared to do. But even when you look in that bigger arena of the education in the K-12 world, there's a lot more supports within that. And there are people supporting how that would all roll out. When we're looking at childcare, that's on an individual childcare program's shoulders to be able to shift so dramatically. And they rose to that occasion and are still continuing to rise to that occasion. I will say that without a shadow of a doubt, every single childcare provider that we have talked with, worked with, and there have been a lot of supports that we've given, and it's still not enough as we're going forward. And so when we're looking at all of this, as we're talking about the sustainability, is really just recognizing that and moving forward and what that looks like in terms of long-term implications. So we had programs that were closing because of that razor thin margin of income coming through and not being able to, or if you are a small family childcare, if you got sick during the pandemic, you could not provide care. So that's a loss of income and a loss of program for yourself. And so when we're looking at this, it is all very much intertwined, but all very, very, very huge and dramatic repercussions, as every little piece is impacting our children and families. And then the other piece that I do want to talk about too is just that extra burden of programs and families. And for those of you that have had to or needed to use childcare within all of this, that extra push to support distance learning. as the childcare arena shifted not to just 0 to 5, we're looking at school age children too now, without having school age. And for some of you I know have kids at home that were then thrust into this model of now you're a distance learner facilitator. Same thing for childcare. So moving from that model of just 0 to 5 care to now helping and supporting however many children you have in your program that are also having their teachers, and looking at what that looks like as well. So as we're looking at COVID and what that has done, it has really shifted that entire mentality of childcare and how important it is. But the one, I will say, really great thing through all of this is that we've really put a spotlight on childcare. And I think we have this recognition that childcare is essential. The parents that have had to pick up that slack of one, either distance learning or trying to work from home when you have children in the background, which that's not easy as we're going through. And I'm sure you guys have been on Zooms and seen all of that happen as people are trying to juggle the insane amount of responsibility that has come out of this. But it has shown how important childcare is. We have this amazing opportunity to really support this already fragile system. As Wendy was saying, we already knew that we were in a childcare crisis, and now we have had it spotlighted through all of this because people have felt that pain. They have now felt the pain and the hardship that every single childcare provider was going through. And so we have this next step and next responsibility, which I will lead in to you, Wendy.
Sure. I know we're running short on time, so I'll be brief on this. Although I must say this is one of the sort of the happy moments that's come out of the pandemic. Members of the We Are the Care initiative, including Raechelle and Christina and others, took time to really dig in on a project to build an online family-friendly workplace toolkit. And this came out of the conversation that went something like this. Businesses want to be able to provide childcare supports for their employees. And sometimes if you're big and have lots of resources or really committed leaders, you can pull off things like on-site childcare, for example. But there are a lot of mid-sized or small businesses or large businesses for whom that's just not a viable option, who still want to do right by their employees. So the question is, well, what else can we do? Can we help subsidize childcare? Can we provide perhaps more flexibility in the workplace? Can we work on family leave policies that augment what's already within the policy arena in government? Are there other things we can do, in other words, to show our families, to show our working parents that we have their backs and that we recognize that they have this plethora of responsibilities to both their children and frankly their parents as well. You know, their care and family-friendly care, not in the topic of tonight's discussion, but we could have a whole other topic around elder care. It all fits within this notion of family-friendly workplace. And so we put together this online toolkit. I must say, without any false humility, that it's an awesome resource. And it's now live. The URL is slowfamilyfriendlywork.org. And please do check it out. As I said, it fits into 5 different categories of family-friendly workplace: ideas, resources, examples in practice. There's some wonderful county spotlights in everything from childcare to flexible scheduling, accommodations, health benefits, and family leave. Those are the 5 big categories, and a lot of terrific opportunities for both employers and employees to dig in on this idea of family-friendly workplace and see what they can do, even in small ways, to shift the culture in their workplace to better support working families. So I do suggest that you take a look at it. I also, if you want to go to the next slide, Raechelle, I wanted to mention that so far we've gotten 3 chambers of commerce to post a link to the family-friendly workplace toolkit on their websites. Each one's done it slightly differently, one from the other. The SLO chamber has it on their tab that says supporting business. And then you go down and they have a childcare tab. And if you click on the childcare tab, you get this whole sort of suite of information about childcare, including the toolkit. In Paso, they have it on their economic development tab as a business tips kind of site. And then the South County Chamber has it on their resources tab. So I would really encourage the Atascadero Chamber to adopt this as a link on your site. And there's much to come. We've put the site together, but we also have ideas about how to staff it as well over time. But this is a first really exciting major step. One last thing I'll say in the last minute or last minute of our presentation is to tell you just a little bit about ways to get involved in We Are the Care itself. We have 4 task forces in motion right now that are part of We Are the Care, and it's made up of both professionals and individual volunteers working on public awareness building, where we make public comments at both civic meetings like City Council and Board of Supervisors, school board meetings, but also meetings like this, and really build overall public awareness around the child care issue. We have a cross-sector collaboration task force whose big baby that we birthed this year was the toolkit, the family-friendly workplace toolkit, and there are other activities within that group to bring business together with childcare professionals. We have a local government engagement task force that is increasingly connected with some work that's happening both with the County of San Luis Obispo, the City of SLO, Cal Poly, and San Luis Coastal Unified School District, and hopefully other cities and school districts soon, to take a look at the public sector's role, the government function in shaping policy around childcare. And finally, most importantly, we have a Power to the Profession task force that's really, really paying close attention to how we can do better by our professionals in childcare, both around fair compensation, professional development, training, pipeline, and certification. So these are these 4 task forces. If you're interested in getting involved, connect with either me or Raechelle, and we are happy to tell you when the next meetings are of these task forces. I think that was that last slide.
I think so. And then
thank you.
Yes. And just again, a thank you to taking this on as part of what this even looks like. And it is very much tied to diversity and equity as we're looking at how we can support that next step in making a better world, and realizing that this, and I love this quote from Fred Rogers, of just making sure and knowing that we need to share the responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. It's so easy to say that. It's so easy to just step back. But then knowing that there are people that see a need and respond, and those are the heroes. And I hope that we invite you all to be a part of that movement of being a hero, and stepping up for our community and our society as we try to make this better. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Raechelle. That was incredible. I have about a page and a half or 2 pages of notes almost here that I've taken down. And thank you for addressing some questions ahead of time. I do want to open it up to the floor for questions, comments. Just a couple things I jotted down. You know, I could not help but think of Whitney Houston, and I believe that children are the future. And having 2 of my own that we have put through daycare here. In fact, Mr. Micah, one of the folks featured in the video, was one of our teachers. Thank goodness for a male, teacher. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I can really appreciate what our really hardworking families that are out there are trying to do and facing on a daily basis. And then the other thing is, my walk away is you want to take care of people, and it does take a village. Nobody should be in this by themselves, because, we are, we are connected. This is part of our community, and we are only as strong as our weakest link. So I've got some questions, but I want to open it up to the floor first to see if there's any questions, comments that anyone else may have before I keep blabbering on here. So thank you once again, ladies. Really appreciate that.
I have a question. How do you, you mentioned child abuse in the beginning. How do you address that?
Lots of ways. So that's actually one of our partner agencies. So it's Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month, because
Right.
we're celebrating everything. But also one of the other pieces, as we look at prevention of child abuse, it really does have to do with family resilience, and supporting families as a whole. So we partner with another organization, or a couple of organizations. One of them is through CAPSLO and the Family Support Services, but also through Center for Family Strengthening. And so when we're looking at child abuse prevention, it's not just that CWS case that we're looking at. We're looking at how and what leads up to child abuse. And it really has a lot to do with stressors within a family. And it can be literally childcare and paying for it. Could be housing, it could be food insecurities. That added stress on a parent is usually what tips them over the edge in terms of all of that. And so when we're looking at supporting families and actually preventing child abuse, it's really giving families that support that they need. And so as I was talking about some of those other drive-through events where families can go and get actual supplies, those are all housed at a family resource center. And so those facilities, they're there all year round to be able to support families in that way. So if there is literally anything, they can come to a family resource center, and we're all connected all together on the back end of what these resources might even look like. And that is part of our mission in creating this connection as we're looking at children and families in order to know what else is there. So we all go through a lot of our trainings, and it's not just that surface of what's going on. We really try to make sure that we're making a connection so we can find out what else is happening, because if we know, we can help.
The other thing I wanted to add, Brenda, I'm so glad you asked that question. You know, Raechelle and I throughout our presentation were talking about just the incredible value of a childcare professional in our community as an important sort of piece of the fabric. And your question, I think, goes to the heart of one of the most important roles of a childcare professional, and that is that they are often the first community-based experience that children have, right? They've been in their home, they've been somewhat isolated in some ways, unless they are part of a larger family community or faith-based community, what have you, but that childcare experience is the first time they're out of the home. And so the role of childcare professionals in spotting risks for child abuse or neglect cannot be, overemphasized. It's an incredibly important role they play. Children go to their pediatrician and see them for 10, 15 minutes. And yet childcare professionals, they're with these kiddos, for hours at a time. And so that function of being both a support to families, but also quite honestly, a watchdog, in cases where there's real potential risk, it's incredibly important. And it even drives home further that need for us to better support this sector because of that important, for lack of a better word, gatekeeper role that they play. So.
Yes, I agree with that. And because I came from a situation growing up of abuse, and it's like, hits me in the heart, and we were very poor. So I understand, how that works. So that's why I asked.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question or comment?
I have a question.
Yes, Penny, go ahead.
You guys reminded me, 30 plus years ago, when I was dealing with sick kids and on the fast track in corporate. And one day I was looking for childcare because my son was sick. And to actually have somebody tell me, and this has stuck with me for the rest of my life, Penny. And this woman told me, it was a neighbor. I was, can you, it was unexpected. Can you help me take care of him? Can you keep watching for a few hours? And she said, Penny, did you ever think about you staying at home with him? And it was like, wow. That was a shift for me to have, to think about, wow, this is all mine. So with that always in the forethought of me when I have to employ female chefs or essentials, you know, people that impact the bottom line, childcare comes into play. And I've been, you know, I've always been very flexible with, you know, flex time, that kind of thing. But one of the challenges that I see too is the fact that these women are dealing with the scarcity of programs, like what you put up on your presentation. And people, you know, people were filled and programs were, you know, had already, you know, gone on. So how do you propose to deal with that segment where, you know, you got to get people interested, you've got to get people, you know, offering more opportunities for these families to have options, because right now there just aren't a lot. And I found myself facing that with a chef probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, where I'm providing childcare. Yeah, he could come in, you know, for a few hours, he can bust some tables. We can, you know, just get him kind of acclimated to what a little work feels like. And you can read the rest of your time there. So just so she could work, you know. So that's what we're faced with as small businesses, dealing with, you know, that kind of thing and the limitations of it.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, Penny. This is the childcare crisis, and we're sort of working from every angle to try to mitigate that strain on our local businesses and our families. And, you know, as Raechelle said, there's no one size fits all for families. There's also no one size fits all for businesses. And I'm guessing, you know, based on what you were describing about the story of your chef, that you run a small business, and I think we're 70-80% small businesses in this county. That's our lifeblood. And so cracking the code on childcare is going to have to design itself around our reality as an economy. I don't have the answer yet, but that's what we're setting out to try to figure out, not just with employers and employees, not just with childcare professionals, not just with government, but with all of us together thinking about it, and how we move forward. So that's a partial answer. I don't know, Raechelle, how you would speak to that challenge.
I honestly want to applaud you for the steps that you have taken. Those are family-friendly workplace practices. Being able to say, yes, your child can come, and knowing that their job and their livelihood is not on the line because of that. And so it's a start. And I think that's also like just what Wendy was saying too, in terms of how many other places we can tap into, and how, I mean, especially now with the funding that is available, we have this ability right now out of this pandemic, to say childcare is essential. And what that looks like, we don't know just yet, but it could be helping small businesses so that they can either help subsidize childcare for their own employees or whatever. Thinking outside that box of like, yes, let's have some more voices at the table to say, as additional funding comes out, we need to help build the system and actually make it sustainable.
I have a fantasy idea that at some point we'll find a way to help small businesses in commercial zones around the county develop co-op preschools where they band together, they commit some level of resources that are then subsidized by either government or other economic development engines to form cooperative preschool models. Now that's a heavy lift, but if you want to sort of know my pie in the sky idea in answer to your question, what if we had small cooperative preschools in these, commercial zones around the county that could be tapped by small businesses?
Or
Kind of a wild idea, but
I'm thinking of something sitting here, probably even just on a basic small, let's start simple level, maybe a registry of people that would be available to small businesses to do daycare on site, to take the child and take him somewhere to the park that's down the street or something for a few hours until the parent gets off. Maybe even something like that would work. I don't know.
Right. Hey, if I can jump in, I think what you brought up, Penny, and Wendy and Raechelle, what I'm thinking is, what are those alternative models that you guys may be looking at from probably outside of our country that we have found or has reported having some success? I mean, for some reason, I don't know if it's the right country, but Denmark keeps coming back to mind and things like that, where I know from an education perspective, having been in the middle school special ed for 10 years back in Georgia, where our kids were right down the road from me in a kinder care at the time. Man, there are a lot of people in a classroom in some of those countries. I mean, it's like 4 adults, and the adult to child ratio is incredible. Provide that support. And so I was just curious, are there, as you were saying, Wendy, if you had your kind of dream situation, are there some models out there that we might want to be aware of and hopefully promote in those conversations through one of the task forces or all 4 of the task forces that you're driving?
Right. I'll start and pass it to you, Raechelle. At places like Denmark, Finland, Canada, that's a national decision that got made at some point along the line, national decision to value childcare and build it into the infrastructure and the fabric of their society. So one of the things that I think it's kind of a hand tied behind our back to try to take this on at the local level is we can only get so far. And we're still struggling with a national picture that doesn't fully support childcare. So I'll admit that right up front. That having been said, I think that there are local examples that we're already drawing from and sort of trying to match peer to peer. Back to Penny's question about, are there ways to a resource directory, for example, on sort of emergency or backup care? I know, for example, PG&E, they're way bigger than a small business, but just to give an example, they've recently contracted with an organization called Urban Sitters, I believe. And that is specifically, it's a benefit that they offer their employees for backup or emergency care. If there's a parent who's sick and it's off hours and they can't do the regular, they might have regular childcare, but they got to show up because there's an outage. They got to get to Diablo and be there. This Urban Sitters backup care contract allows for parents to tap in and get financial support from the company for a certain number of hours a year, I think. So, that's kind of an interesting local model. Not exactly what you were talking about, Penny, but it's, an example of that kind of pickup care, if you will, as opposed to more of a regular, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or every morning or every day, all day care. So, Raechelle, did you want to?
And I would say, yes, you hit it right on there, being a national issue, and kind of that's the other piece of this too, as we're having these conversations and realizing for the most part, a lot of the advocacy that's happened to the state and national level for childcare is coming from the childcare field. And I think that's also where we're starting to branch out here locally, but also throughout the state to change that. So it's not just the childcare field's issue, this is everyone's issue. And that's another piece of advocacy we can extend and hopefully extend the invitation to all of you is to help be a part of that conversation so that it is coming from the business sector. It is coming from everyone else saying, we do need you to support childcare, because until we have all those other pieces, we're not going to make some huge headway. And, when we look at things like the American Recovery Plan that's coming out and what that looks like, at the national level and the amount of support that's happening. And we're excited to see that childcare is mentioned and all of these different systems that are coming through. We also have to look at how our system is built. And this is the opportune time. You know, this is the time when we can say, maybe we should make some tweaks on this as we're moving forward. And just knowing, you know, yes, we have a national and federal model for childcare, which exists within the Head Start and Early Head Start arena. But knowing that, for those of you that don't know, Head Start and Early Head Start is a great and amazing program that's federally funded for childcare across the nation. And having early care and education is a fantastic model. The one caveat I will say with it is that it's income eligible. And so it is meant to be this program to help address equity across the board. And it does a fantastic job of doing that. However, in areas like ours, where I was talking about that gap between the income eligible and the actual sustainable living wage, there's so many children and families that could benefit from the support of that program, knowing that there are many different facets within it that might be able to support. So knowing that we could say, hey, let's shift our model a little bit and help open it up so that we're helping that, you know, that middle class family that's still struggling just as much to make sure that we're able to support them too. So lots of things. Yeah.
There was a period, I believe it was in the 70s. I need to go back and read my history books again, but I think it was in the 70s when there was actually there was an act that almost made it into reality to expand access to free or affordable childcare, and it got vetoed. And it was the last kind of big push to resource childcare on the national level, and we lost that chance back then. I feel like we're headed towards another opportunity at the national level to make some major changes in the way we support childcare across the country. Crossing fingers, because it's really hard to do it only from the ground up.
Exactly. And I think that was going to be kind of my next question is, you know, some of us, I belong to the Atascadero Kiwanis, and I know, you know, their whole reason for existence is to support children in a community. Right? We build things. We you know, put parks together. We do those types of things to support kids. Is there any way to leverage or utilize, you know, that kind of resource of, you know, people power to help with what you're looking to accomplish? You know, if not even just through, once again, education, sharing this information with folks who were previously in business or successful in other endeavors, just to continue to build that sense of community.
Yeah, definitely. I know it's been a little bit since we've done a presentation with Kiwanis. So I think it'd be great to even speak with you guys as a whole in terms of how you can help support. And I do know a lot of Kiwanis projects have helped the childcare arena in general, especially recently. And knowing that even some of your members were childcare providers. So that's a really neat piece. I don't know if you know Angela Ramsey, who used to provide her own family childcare. And she was amazing in that capacity to be able to support children. So just knowing that there's a lot that can be done. And I think that's the other piece too, is we're helping and supporting these small businesses and really looking at what can be done. It's those small things like creating a garden that opens up an entire arena of education, but also kind of lets them know your community is behind you in all of this. Because it's those extra long hours, those extra work that they're needing to do. So I think that'd be a really great partnership to even start looking at of what programs and what they need, because a lot of times they won't ask for help until they're given and that nudge to say this is what could help you as we're looking. And it also might be able to, we can work too on building that bridge when we look at childcare quality. So one of the other programs that I oversee is looking at quality within programs and helping to support what that looks like. And sometimes it is a garden, but sometimes it is helping make a program more accessible in terms of literally a ramp. And that is something that we could definitely partner with and ask Kiwanis to say, hey, can you help in that arena?
also quota of Atascadero, which I'm involved in. We're all about helping children. So I just really am looking to help however I can, and quota of Atascadero would be a good group to approach. So also.
That's great, Brenda. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the 45 businesses that Raechelle profiled at the beginning of this meeting. If there was a way that the local civic organizations could, even as a joint letter, say, we're here to help. Are there ways that you could use with either maintenance upgrades or expanding your space? And I'm thinking back to the pie chart that Raechelle shared of the budget of a childcare center. We were talking about how much of the budget gets taken up in salaries or wages. One small way to be part of the solution is to diminish the pressure on those operating costs, which then releases potential revenue to either offer perks or benefits or even a small wage increase for workers. So in those small ways that you, Charles and Brenda, are describing, you can actually impact in bigger ways than you might imagine just by doing some of those things Raechelle had suggested. And then again, just to double down on another thing that you said, Raechelle, I think in general, whether it's the Chamber or Kiwanis or Quota or any of these business organizations, to just continue to remind ourselves that the childcare professionals are part of this business community. Right. Because I think often not only do business community members and just people in general sometimes forget, oh, these aren't volunteers, these are professionals, and these aren't nonprofits, these are actual for-profit businesses. I think sometimes in the daily grind of getting, kids into their homes and fed and cared for and sent home, they themselves sometimes forget, oh my gosh, I am a member of this business community. And so to really build bridges and value the profession from both of those standpoints, I think is kind of an easy way to support this effort.
You mean all that just doesn't happen by magic and, gremlins and fairies and whatnot? Children are seen but not heard, and they just get to and fro and fed and all that kind of stuff. Oh boy, I'm telling you, wow. I think that's a great point, Wendy, in that I like the idea of a letter. Maybe we can work on, I'll talk to Angela to start there, Raechelle, but maybe we can work on a letter just to make sure everyone's aware that, we have people that are willing to come out and do things. We paint, we build, we clean, we haul, and if that can alleviate a little bit of the burden so that the quality can be improved, that the attention and time can be directed to where it really should be, that would feel great. Okay. Other things, I will follow up with Josh. I know he's out there, but we'll look to get a post somewhere on our website for the toolkit, the family-friendly toolkit, and make that available as a resource to our community, because there's no reason it should not be. That information should be disseminated. And, I think, just let us know what other ways we could be, we could help to amplify the voice that you are, that you have right now. I think that's what we need to do, and we need to continue to push this matter, and we need more people speaking about it, because it's super significant. I mean, as a proud dad of 2 kids, I can't imagine not having the resources that I've been blessed with and my family's been blessed with to be able to do the things we've done to get them where they are today. And I feel for those parents and those families that are struggling, because there's a whole lot of undue pressure on them to try to do something to just love their children that, yeah. So I don't, is there anybody else that would like to say anything or another question, or perhaps, we're coming up on 6 o'clock here. Maybe it's time to wrap up our session. I do want to thank you ladies so much for your for what you shared today. It's really impactful, and I'm optimistic that we can make a difference going forward.
Thank you. Howard. I guess it looks like Howard has a question.
Yes, sir. The floor is yours.
Oh, gotta unmute.
Still muted.
Sorry. My question was about the people coming into the field from Cal Poly. Is it financial? Is that the barrier?
You mean financially viable?
No, is that the barrier? Namely, in this field, I make that much.
Yeah, it's absolutely the barrier. It is absolutely the barrier. There's a child development department at Cal Poly, and there are young people who go into that field thinking, oh my gosh, I want to work in early childhood development. I want to be a preschool teacher. I want to lead a preschool. And they get in, and it doesn't take very long for them to face the hard reality that they are not going to be able to make a career out of this the way the system is currently set up. And so for obvious and fair reasons, I mean, I can't fault Cal Poly academic advisors or faculty for steering them away from childcare or early childhood development into, say, teacher credentialing programs in the K-6 arena, or child psychology, or, all kinds of other things that child development majors might go into. But there is not a pipeline. I don't even know if there are any Cal Poly child development majors really who come out of that field and go into early childhood education and teaching. Maybe an occasional administrator, maybe somebody once in a while who really just feels so passionately, and they might have other resources in their family to be able to make ends meet. For the most part, people going into the profession are coming through the community college system, I would say. Is that, I'm looking to you, Raechelle, to kind of further elaborate.
Yeah, they're either coming through the Cuesta College door, through the community college, or they're already in the field and then doing kind of that back education, as you can come in as a childcare provider, especially doing family childcare within your own home, and then build up you can build up the education after the fact and while you're continuing to provide care. So that's where.
It's a hard sell though, Howard. You ask a really important question. And I think it hurts the faculty members at Cal Poly who want to be able to direct their students into the field of their sort of passion and their skills. And yet they feel it's unethical in a way for them to send, students who have loans and, are trying to make a career. So it's a tricky spot for Cal Poly for sure.
Probably not part of their orientation night to tell them that they're going to make $16 an hour.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a real challenge.
What about the Cuesta? What about Cuesta? Same situation? I mean, it sounded like they were a little different.
Well, it's a little easier, I think, because there are less costs associated with a 2-year degree, and with Cuesta Promise, for example. I mean, there are ways to get through and come out the other side and enter the profession. And like Raechelle said, then kind of backstop it, if you will, with additional continuing education. But that's to the extent that we have a pipeline. The pipeline is coming through Cuesta for the most part right now, and Hancock and other community colleges. Is that, Raechelle, would you say that's a fair?
Yeah, I would say that too, but also again, same piece of knowing and seeing that ceiling so low as you're going through, no matter what. Even at that community college level, there is you can get your associates in accounting and make more. And so just looking at what that is, and even still, it's that sustainable living wage for a family. This isn't that field necessarily for that.
Yeah, one thing I will say to this question about bachelor's degrees in early childhood education, it is a conversation in the field right now. Does it make sense to up the wage to match a bachelor's level education? There's this kind of pressure around that, trying to match those, but then how does that play out in terms of affordability? It's this weird kind of really tangled ball of string. But there are conversations about that. And there are also some school districts who've taken on early childhood education. And so teachers who work in preschools that are managed through the district, they tend to get paid more because they're within that larger system. I think, I don't know if Head Start teachers are paid a little bit more because they have the federal subsidy. Maybe not.
A little bit, not much.
A little bit, but I mean, it's still bargain basement. But you touch on a really important point, Howard.
Well, it sounds like a vicious circle, sort of. because if you increase the pay of a child care provider, then the one working can't afford it if she's just making $16 an hour. So.
And when you can't get people to be in the classes, soon you have no classes.
And that's where public policy comes in. That is why public policy is so important, and why that voice that Raechelle talked about from the business community added to the voice of education, added to the voice of parents, is incredibly important, because it's time. It is time that our public institutions and our society overall helps foot the bill for this thing, because we can't solve it anymore on its own.
Is there any barrier coming from any professional organization has an aspect of sort of the dark side, namely closed shop sort of stuff. For example, do you really need, and I guess you referred to that, Wendy, do you really need a 4-year degree to do it? By that, I don't mean that it's a small job, but some of it's instinctive, and mothers and grandmothers and fathers have been doing it through the ages without any credential program because they just knew how to care, much like a baby bird and a mother bird. I mean, and I know in education, that's real strong, was in education, and that's real strong at certain levels, the credential program, et cetera, and having to take nonsense classes that are just, is that a factor?
It's a huge dialogue would be the neutral term. Debate would be the more appropriate term. Raechelle, I don't know if you want to find a way to answer Howard's question very briefly in time for us to get to dinner. That's a huge issue, though. You've touched on a huge question, and there's no one answer.
No, there's a lot of different pieces and solutions that we're trying to work on, not just here locally, but across the nation, in terms of other types of certifications that might be there, but also knowing that we have this avenue of professional development that's been built, because there is additional resources and knowledge and education that helps equip childcare providers, like Wendy was saying, as those frontline people. It's not just learning to care for your own child, it's recognizing and being able to understand what resources are out there, understanding developmental delays, understanding child abuse prevention and knowing what the signs are and how to support family resilience. It's so much more than just that instinct. And so we're trying to build different pathways through all of this, but just knowing that it's beyond, it definitely does start with instincts, knowing that someone wants to be around children all day long. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a classroom. That's not something just anyone can do in terms of all of that. So it does take a very special and different type of person that wants to do that, but knowing they also need to be equipped in some other arena. And there's multiple different ways we've tried and are continuing to try to normalize and also define across the board what those standards might look like. Yeah.
Do you know, it occurs to me, it's a great way to answer the question with no time left, and that is to suggest that we send you an article that was recently published by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and it's specifically around equity and BIPOC women in the profession, and this balance between the pressure to go get a bachelor's versus having experience in the field. And it's a really interesting article. And so it kind of touches a little bit on what you were just asking, Howard, but it goes sort of beyond that. And it really is an interesting piece as you look at childcare professionals and equity. So we can send you that link to that article. It's really terrific.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you would forward that on, and maybe that can be some supplemental information that we can add to this piece, actually, because I think, as we are the Diversity Council, and we are focused on how do we help our business community learn about diversity, equity, inclusion through education and kindness, and that's kind of our mission. So that would be very helpful. Okay,
I would like it.
And and I think we would all be interested in, I think we have a bunch of former educators here speaking. So With that, we are at 6:05, and I'm sure we could talk about this much further. But I want to thank you so much for sharing what you've shared tonight. You know, kind of cracking open the conversation for us, helping us to get a better understanding of the challenges, the significance, you know, and hopefully we can all, you know, just see the significance of the matter. So I will pursue working with Josh and the chamber to get the links up and additional material. We thank you so much again, Raechelle, Wendy. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this evening. I hope you've taken some good notes and, you know, feel compelled to take some action. Okay. With that, I'm going to close it out and say thank you. Good night, everybody, and stay well.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night, everyone.